My name is Hai Nguyen. I'm co-founder of Affluence, the company behind Prioritization. Today, we're going to cover a crash course in Prioritization. So I'll give you an introduction to the software. I'll help you learn how to use it. Also, take advantage of some tips and tricks that I've learned over the years talking to thousands of customers, and then also show you how to use it with Microsoft Outlook and Teams in order to help you prioritize your emails. One of the things I want to start with is a quote that's inspired me recently, is that productivity is not about time management, it's about misplaced attention. And one of the reasons I bring this up is because it's, for one, it's inspired me quite a bit. I have so many things on my plate. There's 1,000 things I want to do. But I only have limited time. And so at the end of the day, it's not around just having a to-do list. It's not around having a list of tasks that I have to get done or doing them right. It's about deciding what to work on. And that's the single most important thing. And so one of the things I want to highlight to all of you here today too, is that when you use Prioritization, don't think of it as a task management software. Don't think of it as just a way to prioritize your emails or collaborate or understand, what everyone's working on. Instead, look at it as a tool for you to go and sort of look at your entire picture of everything you could do so that you can decide what you should do. So my goals for today, help you understand the basics of Prioritization, understand and apply what's called the Eisenhower Matrix, walk you through how to prioritize tasks, projects, and email, show you basic collaboration features. So then it's not just about managing your own tasks, but also taking the things that you're working on and communicating that to the rest of your team. And then lastly, learn how to use Prioritization and Microsoft Teams and Outlook. Prioritization is the only software that I'm aware of that's Microsoft 365 security certified for Teams, Outlook, and web at the same time. And so we're also a modern workplace certified software. So in some ways, if you used Microsoft, Prioritization is pretty much a no-brainer. But at the same time, Prioritization works completely outside of the Microsoft ecosystem. So we have web app, mobile apps, desktop apps, and so forth. So keep that in mind as well. In terms of timeline, one of the things I want to bring up is, the goal in all of this is to help you achieve value as quickly as possible. In my mind, the reason why we created Prioritization and the reason why I do these training webinars is so then you can go and leave this webinar today and you have a complete plan on how to take complete control over the work that you have to do. So when you think about today, it's really about making sure that Prioritization is installed on all your platforms. And the reason for that is relatively simple. What happens is that, you think about the places where you write down your notes, or the places where you write down, the sticky notes that you have, or the notebook that you have, and then your phone checklists and so forth. So when you have things all over the place, it's really hard to actually grasp exactly what you need to work on. So one of the things we've done with Prioritization is make sure that it works on every single platform. So no matter where you are, at the desk, on the go, inside Teams, inside your email app, it's there, right? And so that's the first thing. So when you install Prioritization, the whole idea is that we're present with you, and we can surface up the tasks that you need to work on. So, some customers just use Prioritization on one platform, but I think that to get full value, you just have it everywhere, and therefore you have one centralized place to know exactly what you need to do. Then also, I want you to create your first personal and team project. And the whole idea is to take everything that's in your brain and consolidate it into one physical, tangible thing. Calling a digital tool a physical thing is kind of ironic. But in some ways, what helps me a lot is to actually put things down so I can see the big picture, right? I have literally dozens of things that I could do every single day, any single day. And so for me to put it all down so I can see the entire big picture, then decide where to spend my time is extremely important. And so I advise that you do the same. And it's two different things. Your personal tasks, these are the things that are important to you personally. And then your team tasks, these are the things where if you're a manager, you want to be able to go and describe what are the things that your team has on their goals for this quarter or this month or whatever it is. And then if you're a direct report and you don't, you're not managing anybody, it's still valuable for you to describe your priorities within the context of the work that you have to do with your manager. And then lastly, for the work that you should do today is just review what's important and urgent. And it's a very simple task, but it's extremely hard. I would say, we spend so much time doing the work that we do, and we spend so little thinking about whether or not we should do it. And so I advise you to do the same. When you think about how you spend your time in Matrix, think of it as an investment, that you're going and you're deciding where to spend your efforts. And then within the course of a week, I think you'd be very comfortable using Matrix. You're reviewing priorities with team members. One of the things that I strongly advise to everybody is just projecting Matrix onto the big screen when you have your meetings. So easy, and customers get so much value out of that simple exercise, because it creates a dashboard where everyone's on the same page. And then you start reprioritizing your work. Then when you actually have meetings with your managers, it's very, very straightforward. You simply show your Matrix and say, hey, by the way, these are the things I'm working on. You're going to assign me something new. So what are we going to take off, right? And so I think it gives you a tangible way to push back on people asking you to do things as well, right? Because most people do not realize what's on your plate. And the vast majority of us have so many things we're doing, but no one else knows. And so Matrix gives you an opportunity to showcase your work. And so that actually plays farther downstream as well. So when you're doing your performance reviews and so forth, Matrix can generate all these reports for you. And then lastly, over the course of the next 30 days, I think you can finally get control of your priorities. You're going to find that one, you're reprioritizing your work constantly. You're creating a habit, and so when you're prioritizing tasks or when you add something, you're thinking about, should I do it right now, or should I do it tomorrow, or should I do it in a week, and so forth. And then lastly, eliminate time wasters. So one of the things that I personally benefit from is just deciding that if something I'm actually reprioritizing over and over and over again, or as in I'm deprioritizing over and over again, maybe I should just get rid of it, right? That meeting, that recurring meeting that's not valuable, why am I doing it? And so forth. So hopefully you'll achieve that over the next 30 days. So this is pretty much the checklist. So in some ways, Matrix itself is a software, but at the same time, we're just a simple way for you to get better control of the work that you have to do. So Matrix is a comprehensive email priority and project management software. At the most important level, we help you, the individual, prioritize your tasks and emails. Both of those actually come hand in hand, and then also help your team stay aligned on key projects. The idea is that if you're prioritizing your work, and then your coworkers are prioritizing their work, then guess what? You can now have an opportunity to work together and be on the same page. And then lastly, as you evolve with Matrix, and then you're bringing Matrix to your entire organization or your department, Matrix becomes what's called a single source of truth. And what that means is that there's never a question on what our priorities should be. That's the first part. But the second part is that if you ever need to go back and look at the history of the things that you've worked on or what others have worked on to get full context, it's all there within Matrix. So let's talk about the fundamental concept behind what Matrix is. So there's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: what is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important. Now, what I really like about this quote is that it helps us understand that, the tasks that we have aren't single dimension, right? And so imagine this. Imagine I ask you to write down the 15 things you have to do. So you start writing them down. And so I'm going to ask you the next question. So what are you going to work on next? Do you work on the thing that you wrote down first because it was the first thing that popped into your head? Or do you write down that last thing because that's the last thing you realize, oh, wait, I should do that too? So the question is then, how do we actually decide what to work on when it's just a long to-do list? So instead, ask another question. And for every single one of these tasks, is that task important and is it urgent? And so what you end up with is what's called the Eisenhower Matrix. The idea is that the things that are important and urgent, that's your quadrant one. That's high priority. That's where you should spend your time. Do this first. Then the things that are important but not urgent, you go in quadrant two, the medium priority. And then the thing that are urgent but not important, that's your low priority. And then lastly, everything else goes into your catch-all. So you should never capture the tasks that are not important and urgent. And by the way, this is actually an aside that I find to be fascinating. When we first created Matrix, whatever, more than a dozen years ago, what happened was we did urgent but not important as medium priority. And then at a conference, a customer came up to me and said, no, that's wrong. And what happens is you should spend your time planning for the important task, not ever wasting your time on things that are urgent but not important. And so, anyways, the reason I bring that up is because at the end of the day, this is a very personal thing, right? Task management is personal to me, task management is personal to you. You and I will not agree on everything, and that's fine. But I want you to bring that up because when you think about the tasks that you write down in the matrix, make sure you think about how does it all fit together? What am I working on right now that has the most impact? So, the idea then is that when you use Matrix every single day, you're not looking at a task list. You're looking at the Eisenhower Matrix to know where to spend your time. And that's always around, spending time in quadrant one. And if you're doing something in another quadrant, then you ask a simple question. Should this be in quadrant one instead? Or am I wasting my time working on something that doesn't matter? So the four quadrant Eisenhower matrix create alignment because it forces you to prioritize from the beginning. When you put things into the matrix, you're not putting them to a list. You're actively planning and you're actively prioritizing and you're actively deprioritizing. And so what's interesting is that when you use matrix in a team environment, success from using matrix isn't about finding out what everyone agrees on. That's the easy stuff, right? Yeah, everyone agrees on, oh yeah, these are the 5 things we have to do as an organization. But what happens is that people have disagreements that are implicit. And so by putting the things down into matrix, you make it explicit. And so now you can have that disagreement. And so when you're in your meeting, don't talk about the things you've agreed on. That's a waste of time, right? Talk about the things that you disagree on, where one person considers to be important, another person does not. That's the interesting part. So I hope that, at the end of the day, you think of Matrix as a communication tool as well, communicating your priorities to others and letting others communicate their priorities to you. I do want to mention that these webinars are on our website as well. And so as I mentioned, I'll share this recording with you so then you can watch it later if needed or, share it with other people. And then also we have webinars on other topics. So this is introduction, but at the same time, there's so many aspects of Matrix that deserves a deep dive. And so we try to create additional topics that you may be interested in down the road. Okay, now let's put this into practice. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my Matrix here. And then let's walk you through how Matrix works and the structure in Matrix. So here on the left-hand side is what's called my list of projects, right? And so these are different projects that I have. So a project, when you select it, essentially is a set of quadrants. So every single project has the Eisenhower Matrix equivalent attached to it. So you see here, I have a project called My Personal Priorities. I click on that, and then front and center is the 4 quadrants. So when you think about Matrix, don't be scared to create different projects because projects are just like context, right? So for example, if you should certainly have one for your personal priorities. I highly recommend that. You should have a project for your team priorities, right? That's the one that you share with other people. You should have that. You might have one for family. You might have one for an initiative you're working on. So imagine if you're tasked with a major initiative over the next 6 months to achieve something astounding for your organization, that it deserves a project of its own because you can prioritize the work within that. So that's how you think about projects, okay? So here I have my personal priorities, I have my quadrants. I'm going to create a simple task. I'm going to say follow up with webinar participants. Okay, so that's a simple task. But then what I'm going to say due tomorrow 2 p.m. And what happens now is Matrix uses what's called natural language to process this. And so now I click next, and then you see how it creates a task. But then on the right-hand side, it actually sets a due date for me for tomorrow at 2 p.m. my local time. So when you use it on your device, it'll set it to your local time. So you see now that I click on this task, the right-hand side opens what's called the item details. This is where you add additional context related to the task. Now, one thing that's really interesting here is that there's a lot of things you can add, but I want to advise you that you don't have to click on every button. You don't have to go and use every feature. Instead, I want to highlight a couple features that I think are important. The first is the star. So what I do is, in my work account, I have more than 300 projects and I have tens of thousands of tasks that I have access to that I can see across my team. But what happens though is that there's only a few tasks that are truly important to me, right? And so if something's assigned to me, I would star a few of them. And so I'd star the ones that are important to me and it pops it to the top of every single quadrant. So it's a way to prioritize within the quadrant themselves. Then below that, you have icons. So what happens is sometimes it's good for us to put some context. I don't use icons very often, but what happens is if you do use icons, Matrix will let you build reports on these icons later. So you can see how much time did you spend on travel related or, the various icons here. But one area of success is actually these colors. So I actually really like the red, yellow, and green as a way to signify whether or not you're on schedule or behind schedule. Okay, now the two features that I think are most important to all of you is one, due date. If we think about talking about, urgency and so forth, if we don't set due dates, how do we know if something's urgent, right? And so a lot of people tend to create tasks, but they don't set due dates because they say, no, I don't know when it's due. I'm just going to write it down, which to me is fine. But what happens is that when you do something like that, if it's a truly important task, the lack of due date will cause it to never surface up into your daily routine or your train of thought. So my recommendation is if there's anything that's important, set a due date. You can always change the due date later, but Party Matrix will track that for you. And then you can see how much you procrastinated, for lack of better words, which is itself a very useful thing. Now, there's a big difference in due dates and reminders. Let me explain how they're different. What happens is this. When you have something, let's say, due in a week, and it's going to take you 3 days of work, you have a due date a week from now. Well, the due date comes, guess what? You can't do 3 days of worth of work in one day. So therefore, you need to make sure that you work on this ahead of time. That's the purpose of reminder, right? So when I click on reminder, one of the things I like to do is I say remind me daily or remind me on weekdays, or I can do like remind everyone monthly. So what this does is that if I have multiple people involved within this task, it'll send everyone a reminder. Now, of course, all of this can be customized, but we've, have a couple buttons for you to select. So I'll go ahead and say remind me daily. Now I'll get a daily reminder. Now let me explain why I personally think the reminder feature is so important. What happens is that all of us get bombarded with tasks every single day. I mean, just think about the number of emails you got today, or the number of meetings that you're going to be in, or the number of phone calls and so forth, right? So what's really interesting is that the things that are recurring, or the things that are loud, or the things that, like someone sends you an email, then they follow up the next day, then they follow up the next day, then they follow up in a week. Even if it's not an important email, it becomes top of mind for you. And so, what I like about the reminders and how I use the reminders is it a way to hack the system and make sure that it is top of mind for me. So I always set a recurring reminder for that reason. The first reminder may come and I'll forget about it because I still have 1,000 other things I'm working on. But then the second reminder, the third reminder, then it becomes really effective. And I actually make sure that I work on those tasks. And I've had so many scenarios where I don't set those recurring reminders. The due date comes, right? Or as the due date approaches, I'm thinking about that task. But the moment the due date passes, I'm no longer thinking about that task. I'm thinking less and less about it every single day. But the recurring reminder will keep on reminding you until you get it done. So leverage that. When you put things into Matrix, my honest opinion is less is more. We have a very generous free tier. You can have up to 5 projects, 250 total items. That gives you plenty of time, or that's plenty of tasks. So you don't have to track your to-do list. I'm sorry, your grocery list in it. Instead, you should track the major task in Matrix, and then setting those due dates and reminders. Okay, so those are the two most important features, in my opinion, with respect to the individual task. Then you have progress and effort, 0 to 100%. Effort, did it take you 30 minutes? Did it take you 15 minutes? Take you 2 hours? Matrix lets you set the efforts, and then you can actually go and generate reports on your workload. Let me give you an example. Let's just say if you're a lawyer and you're just tracking the various tasks, you can actually type down here, set effort to 15 minutes, and then later on, you can actually generate a report on exactly how many minutes you spend on various categories of tasks or in various projects and so forth. Down here, I have the chats. And so the chat is a place for me to, one, communicate with Protomatrix. I can type these commands like you just see here. For example, earlier I'd said remind me daily. I can do that. Or I can say do in 1 week. So Protomatrix will go and process each of these things. And you see whenever it says green here, that means Protomatrix understands it and goes and update your task details. Now, what happens too, though, is it's a place for you to communicate with other coworkers. So if I go and assign this to a coworker, now you see how the owner changes. I'm a follower in this task, and then as this task gets updated, I'll get notification. And so my coworker and I can have a whole conversation in here. Now, the valuable thing about chatting inside Protomatrix, as opposed to just having a meeting, is that it tracks the context. Right? How many times have you had a conversation with, a coworker, and then you're talking about a bunch of stuff you're going to do, then you go back to your desk, and then you don't remember, first of all. Second of all, in a month, you need to bring on another person, and that person has no idea what you and your previous coworker talked about, right? So the whole point of this chat here is it maintains a record, a long-term record around this task. And so 6 months from now, you could assign to another person, and they have a full history and be able to review exactly all the changes and so forth. The notes section, you can create subtasks here. You can add basic notes. If you click fill with AI, our system will go and generate a bunch of subtasks for you. The resources section is where you can add files and documents and emails. So speaking of emails, I'm going to show you the #1 reason why a customer comes to Protomatrix. So if you have Outlook and you get an email, so what happens? It's a very important email. But you can't answer right now. So if you're like most people, you flag the email. That's a good thing. You mark it as unread, which is good too. Now, you have 5 flag emails, that's fine. If you have 50 flag emails, you're now in trouble again, because now what email do you work on? When do you look at it? And so forth. So with Protomatrix, you can do the following. Click on an email. And then if you have Protomatrix, you have to install the Protomatrix for Outlook. And you click on apps here. You search for Protomatrix, turn emails into tasks. So you want the blue one here. And when I click on that, I can choose prioritize email. Now, what happens is a right panel will pop up and it allows me to prioritize this email. I'm not flagging it. Instead, I'm actually taking this email, create a task from it, choose what project it goes in. So let's just say if it's a customer lead, a customer requests an invoice. I can't get that answer right now. I need to assign to another person. I'll go ahead and put in the customer leads project. I'm going to say it's important and urgent. And we're going to assign to a coworker right here. I'm going to say, hey, due tomorrow. Okay. Now I click capture email. What I've just done is I've taken an email, prioritized it in the project, put it into appropriate quadrants, assign it to a person, and then set a due date to answer this email. And then not only that, I can say remind everyone daily. So now I suddenly have a reminder to answer this email as well. So from my coworker perspective, I didn't just forward them an email without context. I've actually appropriately prioritized it within the context of everything else. And the problem is this: if you just forward an email to somebody, what happens? It's going to be part of another set of dozens of emails that they get every single day. And they don't know the difference between that email versus another email versus some other random email, right? So when you prioritize in Protomatrix, it puts it within proper context. And so this is probably the biggest challenge that we've seen customer face, which is they get so many emails, they just need a way to capture that email very easily. Now, one thing that you could do with Protomatrix as well is instead of just prioritizing it, you can actually attach the email to an existing task. So now you just click open Protomatrix, you search for the task, and you simply hover over that task and click attach. Now Protomatrix will go, and instead of actually creating another task and another task for the same email, it prioritizes it and it attaches it. Now, one thing that's also smart about Protomatrix is if you use our Outlook extension with your coworkers and you both are sent an email and you're CC'd on it, guess what? Protomatrix will recognize that. And instead of letting you just prioritize, when you open it, you get an opportunity just to open that email I'm sorry, that task that's already been prioritized by your coworker. So you're not duplicating the work. And then not only that, in Outlook, you'll see a Protomatrix tag here that indicates that this email has already been prioritized. So this is one of those things where, I think it really helps us stay sane. And you're not going to prioritize every email. I recommend against that, right? Because if everything's important and urgent, then nothing is. So you prioritize only the most important email. But Protomatrix has another neat feature, which is the ability for you to forward an email into Protomatrix or send an email to Protomatrix to create a task. So let me show you how that works. When you go back to Protomatrix, you can click on what's called the inbox. When you click on the inbox, you have what's called a secret inbox address. So every single one of you has a unique secret inbox address. If you clicked on here, what happens is you get an email, and what I do is I take this email and I save it as a contact on my phone. So for me, I don't use Outlook on the phone. I actually use Apple Mail. And so then I can't use this Outlook extension, right? So I save this as a contact and I call it Inbox Protomatrix. So I recommend that you do the same. You take this and you save it as Inbox Protomatrix. Now, guess what? You get an email, you're out and about, you're on the phone. So what do? You simply forward the email to this address and it creates a task for you right here in the inbox. And then not only that, in the body of the email, you just type the commands that I showed you earlier. You can say, remind me tomorrow, remind me daily, due in 3 days. So this is one of the top, pro tips that I have in terms of managing emails, especially when you're out and about, which is instead of marking that email as unread and then hoping that you'll remember to go back to the office, you just forward it into Protomatrix. Once you forward it into Protomatrix, it goes into what's called the inbox here. I have a bunch of items here in the inbox. Then what I can do is I can click on that item itself, and then I can move to a project that I need to move and prioritize it. Or I can go and click on this drop down and then select multiple tasks as needed, and then go back to here, and then I move that to an appropriate project or whatever it is that I need to do. So Protomatrix has multiple ways for you to work with your emails. Now, one thing I want to mention real quick is that if you happen to use Outlook for web, not everyone does, but if you do, Protomatrix has a second app also in Outlook. If you click on the left-hand side, search for Protomatrix, then when you do, you can actually pin it on the left-hand side here, and you have the entire Protomatrix application inside Outlook. You don't even have to come to our website. You don't have to install our apps or anything. You literally have the entire Protomatrix application in Outlook. You can switch to here. You can switch back to emails, and it's one centralized place. Same thing happens with Microsoft Teams. If you happen to use Microsoft Teams, you can install Protomatrix here. And so Protomatrix is what's called a universal app. So what that means is that when you install it on Teams, it works in Outlook. When you install it on Outlook, it works in Teams. But there are multiple applications. And so as you can see, I have the entire Protomatrix application right here in Teams. I never have to leave it, and leave the platform itself to actually go use Protomatrix. All right, so let's go back to Protomatrix now, but now I'll just show you inside Teams because this gives us an opportunity to see how the software works in a totally different platform. So you see how I still have a list of projects on the left-hand side, and then earlier I click on my personal priorities here. This is my task. So now what do? Let's just say, I created here in quadrant 4, but I want to change the priorities. I simply drag and drop it. So Protomatrix allows you to very easily drag and drop. And then the second thing that I like to do is if you have a lot of tasks, you can actually resize the quadrant. So this is actually pretty neat because, when you project Protomatrix onto the big screen and you're having a team meeting, you don't want to have everything be equal. Instead, you actually reprioritize it like this. Then you can focus on the task, on the top left, which is the high priority task. Now I'm going to go ahead and switch to a different project here. So here I have my team priorities. So imagine if this was a project where I have multiple people involved. As you can see, when I actually assign tasks to various people, you actually see their picture or their letter shows up here. You can upload your own avatar. So that allows you, you see people's faces and so forth if you wanted to. But otherwise, you can see exactly who's responsible for what. One of the things that's really valuable about Protomatrix is our ability to help you find the needle in the haystack, for lack of better words, right? So we have what's really different ways to look at the same data. So I'll show you this. We talk about the quadrants all the time, but Protomatrix has a list view. The list views allows you to sort it, right? So it's very easy. You can have a meeting and say, what are the things that are overdue? You click on this and Matrix will sort them by the due dates. And now you can actually take a look at them and start going through them. As you can see, all my star tasks go to the top. So that's your strategy on using star. You see that? Like, even though I'm sorting, Matrix differentiate between the star tasks and non-star tasks. This helps your team focus on the most important task, even if other criteria are not there. Now, one of the things you can do here as well is actually click on filters and then choose the column you want to show. So Matrix gives you a bunch of other columns, and now you can have essentially, sortable Excel sheet of all the tasks that you have. But here's a question. What if you have a coworker that's going on vacation and now someone else needs to take over the job? Well, guess what I can do? First, I can go and select, the specific task and say, okay, you know what, these 3 tasks, I need someone else to do it. And so now I go to edit and I'm going to go change owner, and then I'll change the owner. And so you see how I went and quickly I'm able to take a bunch of tasks and redelegate it to another person. Now, what's nice is that that person can go and click on the task, and again, they see the full history, right? The complete context of the conversation. You see, going back to more than a year here, and I can keep scrolling. And so from the person who's taking over the job, they get this treasure trove of context that otherwise is not there. So when you think about Matrix from the perspective of an organization, you have so much domain knowledge, you have so much expertise, of people having written comments or notes and so forth that otherwise would be lost. And so Matrix keeps all of that centralized for you. One of the things that's neat about this view too is I can go ahead and click on select all too, and then guess what I can do? I can click edit and I can say, I'm going to click share and I say generate an email. So what Matrix does, it actually will generate an email report. And I'll show you how that looks in a moment my Outlook opens. And so what happens is actually generate a nice Outlook email for me with the entire with the reports of all the items that I've selected right now. And now I can send this to somebody else. So what's useful here is that if you need to send a report to your executive or to your customer, if you have a project where you work for a customer, or if you have a project where you work on an initiative and your executive said, hey, by the way, what's our status, right? So Matrix lets you build an email report just like that. Now, the next view you have is what's called the Kanban view. The Kanban view takes the same data you have in Matrix, but instead split it into 3 columns: the things you have to do, the things that are in progress, and the things that are done. Again, from a project manager perspective, this view helps you understand what else do I have to do to make sure that this project is done. And so with Matrix projects, you can actually have what I call 3 types of projects. The first is a persistent project. My personal priorities, that's persistent. I always have something to do, right? And so I might mark things off, but add new things. Or same thing with your, for us, we have, for example, a project for each of our applications, our Matrix for Mac, Matrix for Teams, and so forth. They are persistent. That to-do list always expand, never goes away. Then you have what's called transient project, where it has a start and an end date. And so in this particular case, if you're a project manager, maybe it's a transient project, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that they're done, right? So it goes from here to done. You see how I can actually just drag and drop, and now I mark tasks as done. Very, very easy. When you have a meeting or you need to take a screenshot of this to put in your presentation, extremely straightforward. You have the calendar view, and so anything that has a due date will show up here. Then you have a Gantt chart view. So the way the Gantt chart view works is Matrix will take anything with due dates, but it helps you see the big picture. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and choose a different project here. So in this project, I have a lot more tasks. And now if I go to the Gantt chart, one of the things you can see is actually Matrix generate the Gantt chart for me automatically. There is no opening a Gantt chart, creating a task. You don't have to mess with Microsoft Project and the complexities around there. Instead, you're just creating tasks. You're just creating action items. You're prioritizing them, and Matrix will generate this Gantt chart for me automatically. And then if I click on a task, I can edit the dependencies, et cetera, within the resources itself. So what I want to highlight pretty much is that Matrix sort of gives you this centralized quadrants as where you prioritize your work. But then as you use Matrix, that information can be viewed from many, many different angles. Now, one of the angles I like best about Matrix is what's called the one-on-one view. So instead of looking from a project perspective, I'm going to show you a different perspective. I'm going to show you a people perspective. So if you go to here and you choose one-on-one, what happens is I can select anyone that I work with, and Matrix will show me all the tasks I have in common with that person across all of my Matrix. So imagine if you work with a coworker, you guys are involved in 10 different projects, you have 30 tasks shared with each other, and you have a meeting. You're not going to go and click through 30 projects or 10 projects to look at your task, right? Matrix aggregate all that information for you into one centralized place. And then I can even click on filter here, choose group by project, and now you can see every single project and then also the tasks associated with each. You can sort it again as needed. You can select them, you can modify them, you can generate a report on them. For example, I'll go ahead and generate a billable hours report that tells me how many hours I've spent on this particular project. And then not only that, if you click on filters, instead of just looking at unfinished items, I can see all the finished items as well. So then here's how it works. Imagine if your manager comes to you and say, hey, by the way, what are all the things that you've done for me, right? Well, guess what? You go to this view, click on the filters, change to completed. You have this report that shows, hey, by the way, these are all the things that I did for you recently. You want me to generate an email for you or export to a CSV for you to see? So as you can see, what happens is that, again, you're just tracking the task. Everything else comes with Matrix for free, for lack of better words, right? The reporting, the tracking, the communication, the ability for you to show your manager how many things are on your plate. One of the things that just a quick aside, I emphasize that a lot because for a lot of people, they're working on so many things, but people don't appreciate it, right? The person who does a lot of work tend to get more tasks assigned to them. You've heard that before. And that's the same thing that applies to everything else as well. So whenever you're assigned a task and your manager says, hey, we got to do this, you can go and open up Matrix, open up the one-on-one if you have to, or you can go to the search view or whatever and show them, hey, these are all the things that's on my plate. I'm okay taking on this new thing that you want to do. So what are we getting rid of? And so this is the one-on-one view. It's a people-centric view. It's a very unique feature in Matrix. And what's nice about this is it works inside Teams. So if you go to Microsoft Teams, what happens is you can click on this plus right here, add a tab, add Matrix, and then add the one-on-one. This allows you to add a one-on-one tab with every single person that you talk to in Microsoft Teams. And what you get is you get this view. You can pre-select it to the person. And now when you have a conversation with them in Teams, you can just click on the one-on-one and see all the tasks you have in common with them. Click on Add Share Task, and guess what you can do? Matrix allow you to create a share task directly from this one-on-one view, automatically assigned to the other person, automatically adds as a follower. You can choose what project it goes in. You can set the task name along with, those natural language that I showed you earlier, and you click add. So when you have a meeting with somebody, and if you're the manager now and you're assigning tasks to others, this is the best way because it automatically assign it to them and you can automatically set the due date. Because the excuse I hear all the time is, oh, I didn't write that down. Well, you don't have that excuse anymore because as you're having the meeting inside Teams, you can add these shared tasks together. And then Matrix we have so many other integrations with Teams. So we're probably the most integrated solution within Teams. And then as you use Matrix, hopefully you'll explore that more as well. So go back to Matrix. I'm going to start wrapping things up and showing you the last few things that, how to put the Matrix to work. The first thing is we talk about projects, but I didn't show you how to create project yet. Click on create here and then project. When you create project, you have several options. The first is a blank project. That's the most straightforward, right? You go here and you just literally type in whatever name that you want for a project. You can choose the color of the quadrants. It's completely visual. There's no functional aspect to the color, but you can actually associate to user group. So as you use Matrix more, this is an advanced way to manage your team. So instead of inviting individuals to a project, you can actually say, hey, this project is related to engineering team, or this is for the marketing team, or this is for, an ad hoc team that you create of like 3 different people and so forth. So group is just a way to manage all those projects at the same time. You can choose from basic templates. So for example, Eisenhower Matrix is our most basic, but then you can choose the SWOT analysis or the getting things done methodology. Now that's one way to create a project. The second way is what's called public templates. So we've generated more than 1,000 templates for you, completely free to use. And it's just different ways to use the 4 quadrants. And so you can go to public templates here, choose one of our templates, for example, 30, 60, 90 day, or you can save your own templates. So let me give you an example. Let's just say if you create a project in Matrix and you created 30 tasks, and those 30 tasks includes all the stuff you have to do as a new employee. And so that would be reading certain documents, that would be, signing certain documents and so forth, go through a specific training program. You simply save that as a template. Then when you have a new employee, instead of recreating those 30 tasks, you go create project, choose employee onboarding template, then choose a start date for that employee, and Matrix will create that project, all the tasks for you, and then automatically set the due date from the start date. So very, very powerful way to capture recurring projects, either employee onboarding or customer onboarding, or various initiatives that you do every single quarter. And then you can also create a project with AI. With Matrix, you simply type in a goal and our system will generate the task for you. And then lastly, you can import from CSV. We actually have a really neat integration with CSV files where you can take a project, export as CSV, edit that, re-import it as needed, but also, create your own CSV that you have where maybe you have a bunch of tasks in some other system. You can actually just generate the CSV and then import it into Matrix. So that's how you create a project. So my recommendation to all of you is, one, create a project for your personal tasks, right? We talked about that before. And then you create a project for your team priorities. Once you create a project for team priorities, when you open the project, on the right-hand side is what's called your your project details. This is where you can edit the project itself. And this is where you can click plus and invite people to the project, right? So if you're a manager, invite your direct reports to here. Now, you have all these direct reports. When they log into Matrix, they see exactly what the priorities are. So from a manager standpoint, what's valuable about this is that you can go into one project and you see what everyone's working on. And everyone else can do the same thing too. So for us, that transparency itself is extremely important. Actually, the way I visualize it is, think about as you walk around the office and you see a 4 quadrants float above everyone's head. And that quadrants tells you exactly what they think are important, right? Just imagine how valuable that is. No, very few people articulate all these things that they're working on. And, because no one asks. And then also they have so many things. And so the way I think about Matrix, the value of Matrix, is that it's a communication tool. So then you look at someone's matrix, maybe your managers or your coworkers, and say, wait a minute, I thought this was more important or this was less important. Why aren't we working on this, right? And so again, I want to emphasize that it's the disagreements that are interesting, right? If you agree on everything, you don't need Matrix. You just go and do whatever you do. But once in a while, when you use Matrix, you find a disagreement, and that's magical. A disagreement on something that matters, right? Not a disagreement on something that does not matter. So your key here is to identify the things that are not so obvious. And then we spend, again, so much time working on things, and we spend so little time thinking whether or not those are the right things to work on. So with Matrix, hopefully that is very, very visible to you and your team members. So then, if you're a manager and your direct reports are going in here and then they're working on things that's low priority, and then you ask them why are they doing that, and they said, oh, I didn't know that it was low priority. Then you're like, wait a minute, look at Matrix. It literally is in quadrant 3. Why are you working on it? Right? You see how valuable that can be from a conversation standpoint. And so this creates that single source of truth for your team. So that's what I recommend to create a personal project, that team priorities project. If you happen to, manage, like, let's just say multiple factories, create a project for each of those factories. If you're an operation manager, create project for various aspects in your operations. Don't be scared to create projects. So again, I have more than 300 projects in my account. One of the things that Matrix does really well is aggregating that information regardless of the project it's in. So if you go to the hamburger menu here, on the left-hand side now, we have a couple of other views. For example, I have the calendar view. But now this is not a calendar for my project. This is a calendar across all projects. So as you can see, when I go in this calendar view, I see all the tasks I have, but I can click on projects here and I can choose what project I want to see, and Matrix will aggregate that information for you. And then not only that, when I'm in this view, I can click on this filter and I can choose all the tasks that's assigned to me, right, across all my projects. And so as you can see how I can select all projects, I see select the task assigned to me, and I have one perspective across everything. Similarly, I can go to the Gantt charts, but now this Gantt chart is not for just one project. This Gantt chart is across all my projects. So you can see here, I have one single Gantt chart to see all the tasks assigned to any specific person all the way through 2028, right? So imagine if you ever need to spend time thinking about resource allocation, or who's too busy, who has bandwidth and so forth. Matrix gives you that perspective across a day, across a week, across a month, across years. And then also I can go to the search view here. And this search view is what's called the master view. This shows you everything that you want to see across all of Matrix. So anything that you have access to. And so what that allows you to do is from this view, again, you can click on filters, you can find the stuff assigned to you, you can search for things, and then you can generate an email report. You can export it CSV as needed. And one thing I forgot to mention in all of this is when you work with other people, when you start Matrix, one of the things that happens is you have to decide, where do I spend my time? Like, what do I look at first, right? That's a question that people have. So if you look at Matrix here, I mentioned my list of projects, but what happens is I also see new assignments. So when someone assigns me a task in Matrix, I get this little button here, and I click on this, and I'll see exactly what's been assigned to me. Or if someone mentions me, I actually get to see that as well. So when we look at Matrix, these are ways for us to surface our the important tasks to you. So if you assign someone a task, that's what happens. They'll get to see this new assignments. So part of the workflow that you have to instill within your team is just opening Matrix and looking up here to see if they got new assignments or new mentions. And then there's a little button that says today. This is what's called the agenda. So the agenda tells me everything I have to work on today, but also shows me the stuff I have to work on for this entire week as well, and anything that's overdue. So you see how I can click on this, and I can, if I'm done, I just hover over this and click on the checkbox right here, right? So now that allows me to mark the task as done. And then if someone assigned me this, they'll get a notification that I finished this task. And so the notification comes to you from the alerts view. So if you click on the alerts view here, it says 33 items required your attention. These are the items that, one, people assigned to you, people mentioned you, tasks that you assigned to others, but got updated, got finished, for example, that will show up here. And then on the top right here, there's a drop down. If you click on this drop down, actually, I'll show you. If you click on this agenda, one thing you can do on the top right here is choose items I own or items I follow. And actually, there's a difference, which is if you're mostly if you get assigned tasks, right? Then you don't need to know what everyone's working on. You just want to know what are the tasks you need to work on. So then you choose items I own, right? These are the things that were assigned to me. But if you're a manager, you want to know the status of tasks that you assign to everybody else. So instead of choosing item I own, you choose items I follow. So when you assign a task to another person, you're automatically a follower. So I wanted to bring that up because at the end of the day, Matrix is pretty good for managers to understand what everyone else is working on. And so that's why we have that particular view. And so, if you see that a coworker is falling behind all the time, you go to items I follow, you can see that person here, and you click on a task and you said, hey, Tyler, what's going on here? Right? And so imagine if Tyler still doesn't respond, that's when you use the mention, right? So now you mention Tyler, I need you to respond, right? So now Tyler will get a notification in the mentions box now. So that escalates. But then also what I can do is sometimes Tyler still doesn't respond. I can go ahead and go into my Matrix here. I can go to a conversation with somebody. I can click on this plus, right? And then I can choose Matrix. And then I can actually attach a task itself. And then I say, hey, I assign this to you, but I didn't hear back. And now Tyler can open this task directly inside Teams and respond to it as needed. So as you can see, Protomatrix works across all of these platforms to make sure you have one centralized place to be synchronized. Okay, so I've shown you a lot of things. Now let's recap what you should do today. One, create a project for your personal task, your team task. Well, that's after you install Protomatrix for Teams, for Outlook, or our desktop app. So Protomatrix has a Mac app, Windows app, mobile app, Chrome app, Edge app, and so you can actually have these extensions as well, right? So install Protomatrix where you're going to work. So for me, I actually like the web app because the web app allows me to actually save different views. So I can actually have a bunch of tabs that goes to different projects in Protomatrix, and I can actually create all sorts of filters on them. But in general, if you use Microsoft Teams, you should install Protomatrix for Teams and inside Outlook as a no-brainer because you need to prioritize your email. Just remember, in Outlook, you have two different apps, right? This extension and this extension. Okay, that's the first thing you got to do. Create those projects, and then invite those people that you need to into those projects, and then start creating the task, and then just share it during your meeting. That's all you got to do. It's like, hey, we're gonna have a meeting, our staff meeting. Let me project our project on here so then we can be on the same page. And then you're gonna have disagreements, a lot of disagreements. That's a good sign. That means you can start reprioritizing. But now everyone who leaves are on the exact same page. They go back to their desk, they open their matrix, they see the exact same matrix as you, and everyone's agreed on what it is they need to work on, right? So you can have disagreements, but then you're on the same page afterwards. So that's why I would recommend member day one. By day 5, you might have additional projects relevant to your specific workflow, and now you're reprioritizing all of those projects, the tasks within those projects, and then you're constantly reviewing. My recommendation, make sure that you spend an hour every single week to reprioritize. And to some of you, that sounds like a lot, but think about it. If you're spending 40 hours working, 39 hours doing things, and 1 hour planning, is that too much to ask? And that's the ironic thing in all of this. People love to hit the ground running, but they spend so little time thinking about whether or not they should be working on those things. And I bring it up and I feel passionate about it because I struggle with it, right? I have so many things I need to work on. So every single day I have to go and look at the things I have to do and make sure that I focus. So I recommend the same to you. And so over the course of 30 days, I think you're going to find that Protomatrix will add a ton of value just to keep you sane. The fact that you take these tasks and you put it down into something that's tangible and you're reprioritizing and you're focused, to me, that is the number one thing you can do in Protomatrix. And the quadrant view is just a phenomenal way to ensure that, we are prioritizing. Just remember that if everything's important and urgent, then nothing is. If all your stuff in quadrant 1, you're doing it wrong, right? And so, my general recommendation is you can capture all these tasks in the inbox, prioritize no more than 25% of the things in quadrant 1. Make sure you set those due dates. Make sure you set those reminders, okay? All right. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my presentation here. If a couple tips for all of you, if you're a manager, create a project for your staff meetings and screen share it. If you're managing multiple sites, create a project for every site. Essentially, every site, location, or dashboard deserves its own matrix, right? And that's okay. It's okay to have a lot of matrices because you saw how we have those global views that can aggregate that information. If you have specific training programs, create the project and then save it as a template that I showed you earlier. And then you can launch one of those templates instead. That reduces a lot of duplicate work. Otherwise, you can also export it as a CSV. Then when you're ready to launch a project again, just create a project from CSV and then choose the Protomatrix CSV. What's neat is that once you have it in a CSV mode, you can edit it. You can change all sorts of stuff. And then when you import, it recreates all that for you. If you're a small business owner, I recommend you create a project for each of your departments, and it depends on your scale. If you're 25 people, that's very straightforward. If you're 250 people, then I recommend that each of your departments have their own set of priorities, and then you have one project that itself is a dashboard project. So Protomatrix lets you put projects as tasks. So you can prioritize the projects and then click on that task and jump to specific projects. So it's very meta in that sense. And then if you're an individual contributor, one recommendation I have is to create a project to track your goals for promotions. The reason I say that is because we do so many things, and most of the time it's taken for granted. People assign you all sorts of stuff, and then you do them, but then maybe it's not relevant to your direct line of work, but you've done them, right? So that's why we have that search view where you can change to show you all the things you finish across all the matrix. It's a very powerful way to prove your value. I mean, it's a very important aspect of using the software. What you do now, make sure you install Matrix for Teams and Outlook. I like the desktop app because it actually can send you notifications. So it allows you to stay top of mind. Remember what I said? The problem that we have is that the non-important stuff can just come to us over and over again. That spam email, that spam call, my goodness, it keeps coming. And like you keep on thinking about it even when you don't want to. So hack that in your favor by making sure that your own most important tasks are constantly reminding you to work on it, right? So you fight the noise with with drowning it with real noise, for lack of better words, or signals, whatever it is. Create a project highlighting your priorities. Make sure you set those due dates and reminders. Make sure you ask your colleagues to do the same. Even if everyone goes and just do their own matrix and not collaborate with each other, but then every week you guys are just comparing notes. It's like, hey, let me see your matrix. That's very valuable. I think that's a really simple way to use the software. By the way, you could do this a bunch of sticky notes. The only thing you're missing is, the analytics, the global view, the switching the perspective and so forth. But, I digress. Set 1 hour each week to review your priorities. Sit down and compare notes every week, okay? All right. So what success with Matrix should look like on a personal level? You're checking Matrix every week. One central place to track priorities. Make sure that you prioritize those emails. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Otherwise, you can also shoot me an email to hi@alphamins.com. Thank you for your time. I'll take a look at the questions now. Great. So there's a bunch of questions. So I'm going to go start reviewing them here. So will Matrix auto flag overdue tasks? The answer is yes. So actually what happens is this. So if you go back to here, one of the things for tasks that are overdue, you see them in the alerts. So if you go to home view here, you see this alerts right here? I actually can click on overdue and reminders. And so anything that's overdue will show up here as tasks that are overdue, and that requires your attention. And then what's nice is, by the way, you can just mark those tasks as done, because sometimes, we do a lot of cleanup afterwards, especially if you haven't checked Matrix in like a week or whatever, or you come back from vacation. That's one of the challenges I face. Like I literally have 1,000 reminders because I have so many things in here, but that's what you would do. Yeah, this is the overdue reminders right here. Click on alerts to here. But you can also go to the search view, right? And the search view lets you find out all the things that are overdue. You click on search, and now this is the global view. This is across all your projects. Click on overdue. Now you suddenly see all the overdue tasks. Click on filters, change it to assign to me. And now suddenly you have a list of all the tasks that are overdue that are assigned to you, right? And then, magically you select all, and then you go to edit, and then you say change owner and then change somebody else. So that's an easy way to edit Matrix, all the tasks across Matrix. If the email contains an attachment, is that attachment automatically linked to the task? The answer is yes, but it really depends on the rules that you set. So when you go to Outlook here and you open Matrix, there's a couple things you can do. Click on open here, and now this is where you can configure it. So when you do that, there's a gear icon. You choose settings, and you see here, it says use message body, attach original message, new item links to attached file, etc. So these are the options. So if you want everything, you turn all three on. Then when you attach an email, it actually attaches it as a resource. So it's an EML file. So then you can click on that email file. It opens the email, and the attachment is in there. One thing I want to mention is some people get confused on the Mac, because Mac has Apple Mail and then Outlook. All you got to do is make sure that you set the default program to open email file as Outlook. Then it's all centralized. We have documentation on that, or you can just search for how to do that. So most of what I mentioned demo is desktop. Is a practical and handheld device? That's a very good question. So the answer, I actually like our web app on the mobile device. So if you're on a mobile device, you just go to Matrix, and actually you can see all the tasks that you have. You can switch between projects and so forth. But what I like about the mobile device, or remember that tip that I have that I gave, make sure you get that inbox address, because that allows you to capture those emails so that when you go back to Matrix, you have that. Now, I think the biggest drawback on the mobile device is that we don't have these rich global views of global Gantt charts and so forth, because there's just not enough space. But it's good enough for you to see your alerts. It's good enough for you to see your agenda. And then it's good enough for you to see your quadrants and resize it and so forth. Question is, does Matrix integrate with OneNote? So it's actually, we don't integrate with OneNote. We actually integrate with a couple of apps. So let me see what I can show you here. This thing's covering my. So we have a couple of integrations. Connectors. So if you go to Matrix connectors here, these are some of the integrations that we have. So for example, you connect to Jira, Outlook, Planner, To Do, Azure Planner for Teams, etc. So these are the connectors that we have. But Matrix has what's called the Outlook and Edge extension. So if you use OneNote on, if you browse any website, if you have the Matrix extension and you have something that you want to capture as a task, simply select the text, right-click, choose Matrix for Edge, and then save selection to Matrix, and that's it. Matrix will literally create the task for you, take a screenshot for you. So if you're in OneNote and then you have a bunch of notes in there and you realize there's a task you want to create, you just select that text, right-click, and convert it into a task. And then when Matrix creates the task, in the resources section, it will link back to that OneNote page that you're viewing. So instead of integrating with OneNote, Matrix integrate with anything that has a web URL. So it's actually pretty powerful from that perspective. Like most things, this requires discipline. What is your experience as to the percentage of people who actually use it faithfully? If I introduce to my org, will 10% use or 80% use? That's a fantastic question. The discipline part is exactly right. And in fact, it's actually kind of interesting. When you think about Matrix, we see two categories of people. The managers are the one that actually really care about the quadrants, care about the priorities, right? Because they want to make sure that people are working on the right things. Now, from the people who are getting assigned tasks, they don't care about that as much. So that's why we have that agenda view. And so if you are essentially a lighter user of Matrix, essentially the explanation is the following. What do? You don't go in and browse every single project and look what you have to do. Instead, you click on the home view, see what are the things that are assigned to you, the things that mentioned you, and then your agenda. And that's pretty much it. You get those things done, you update those tasks, right? So those are the 80%. The 10% are the people that actively prioritize, but guess what? They can go and then they can go to the same agenda, but instead they're looking at items I follow. And so they get the complete perspective. One of the biggest challenges that organizations have in general is that everyone's on their own thing, right? And it's fine until there's a problem. So let me explain what that means. So imagine, one person uses sticky note, another person uses their notepad, another person writes in OneNote, another person writes in Planner, and so forth. Fantastic. They're all set. That person leaves and suddenly they have all these to-dos and you have no idea what they need to work on. You have no idea what the priorities are. You have no idea what the context is for each of their work. So I think in some ways, manager can have the option of saying, you know what, people do your thing, and we don't even worry about what happens in retrospect. But a second perspective is, you know what, we do have to ensure that we have one centralized place to prioritize our tasks. So hopefully that answered your question. So I think part of the discipline is that I think the managers are good. It's also they have to communicate that to their coworkers and the value around it. And that is why I emphasize being able to generate your reports for your performance review. And so when you go and generate that for your performance review, guess what? You save so much time. I mean, I remember, colleagues where literally once a quarter, they're spending 2 days digging through their to-do list to find the things that they've done just to prove their work, right? With Matrix, you do that in 30 seconds. And I think that's a huge value proposition. So questions around templates, tasks that you can set up. So we don't have templates for subtasks, but as I mentioned, you have the templates at the project level. So for example, once you create a project, so let's just say, now let's see if I can find a project here. Imagine every time you have an accounting client sign on, you have to do a bunch of things, or maybe this is something you do every year. Once you created this to-do list, go to the top right here in the project details, save this as a template. That's the template. This template system will track all these tasks, all these due dates. So when you launch a project from that template, it creates all of the information for you, which is a very, very useful way to capture all that information. So you can go in here within the tasks themselves and you can add notes and so forth too. So that's something I recommend that you play with. And so Matrix let you export that as CSV, play with it, import it, and so forth. So if you have a lot of repetitive tasks, it's just a matter of making the workflow work for you. Uh, must your team members have the web app to have meetings and manage projects in the app? No, not at all. So for Microsoft Teams, I assume that's what you're talking about. Matrix works in Microsoft Teams for desktop, for Mac, for Windows, as well as for mobile. And then in terms of Outlook, though, the web app here in Outlook only works in the web. I'm sorry, the app here, because it's Outlook's limitation, not ours. So in that case, you can still access Matrix via the web app, or again, you can install Matrix as a desktop app. So we have a native desktop app for every single platform that you can just use. So everyone works in different ways, but that's how you can use Matrix. Perfect. Thank you so much for all your questions. You guys asked fantastic questions today. As I mentioned, feel free to reach out to me, hi@affluence.com. If you have any questions, you can always submit a ticket to us at helpdesk@affluence.com as well. I hope this was helpful. As mentioned, I'll also send you this recording afterwards. Thank you all.